Hello everybody and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and we're finally back with day 3 of Listmas 2024, where we're going to be giving you my top 10 park pet peeves. We're going to be diving straight into some of the things that just annoy me the most whenever I'm visiting a theme park. Whether it be from the park and their policies themselves, guests ignoring certain policies, or just other things that end up happening almost every single visit. This list was actually really hard to whittle down into a solid 10. I probably could have made this a top 25 list if I really felt like it. But let's go ahead and start off with number 10. Number 10 for me is upcharge attractions. Now, for me, when I'm visiting a park, I'm already spending a lot of money, especially on parking, which that could have been on this list too, with parking fees usually being upwards of $35 and $45 at this point, which is insane in itself. But then to enter the park after paying for your pass or a day ticket, then seeing other attractions that you specifically have to pay another $10, $15, $20, maybe even upwards to $40 to experience. Now, this doesn't include certain rides that cost money to skip the line for. I think that's okay. But this applies to rides that are usually owned by a vendor that is renting out the space in the park, like your typical sky coaster or go-kart attraction. These rides seem fun and honestly would have way too long of a line if they weren't paid for. But the fact that they're everywhere, sometimes 3 or 4 separate times in one park, taking up so much space and asking so many guests to pay an extra exorbitant amount of money, really just puts me off of ever even attempting to ride them, even if I'm interested in checking them out. Coming up at number 9 is another expense-related pet peeve, and that's surcharges on food, lockers, merchandise, and more. Again, I'm already paying a lot of money to be in this place, and I'm already going to be spending a lot of money on the food. That's already a given, just like movie theaters or at concerts. We know the food prices are going to be way higher than they should be already. So why add another surcharge on top of it? Especially if it's just in the fine print on the side of the window. It's incredibly frustrating. These companies already make so much money, especially off of food. Why charge us even more? It just makes me more likely to stop at the fast food restaurant outside the park before going in. Number 8 is going to be moving away from the money side of things a little bit, as to me this is park employees being dismissive or just completely ignoring the task at hand. Now don't get me wrong, I think employees are severely underpaid, deserve a lot more benefits and better treatment than they're already given from both the companies and guests alike. But it can be extremely frustrating sometimes when you're waiting upwards of 45 minutes to an hour for one specific attraction, only to get up into the station and see an employee doing a cartwheel. Yes, that is an actual experience I've had before, instead of checking restraints that are already pulled down and the train being ready to go. Or something else I've seen at a lot of parks through the years is employees just chit-chatting instead of actually doing anything. And if it was on one cycle, I have no problem with that. But if it's every single cycle for a full 30 minutes, if anything, it'll just get the guests more worked up, and in some cases keep the employees there for longer into the night because the line is still not gone. And I'm not saying they need to have a 20-second dispatch every time. There are just some instances I've seen where we were held up upwards of an hour in some cases for employees to goof off, talk trash to our faces, or just genuinely not care. And unfortunately, that 0.1% of park employees really leaves a mark on a guest visiting a park, especially for a first time. Number 7 is a little less forgivable, and that's smoking outside of designated areas. Now, I will concede that the US is a lot more strict on smoking regulations than everywhere else in the world, but especially as someone who's suffered with asthma all of my life, smoking is kind of a detriment to my existence. And parks throughout the years, especially in California, have done a great job of having multiple spaces within their parks for people to smoke. Now, in the past couple of years, especially since COVID, they have gotten rid of them completely and say that they are completely smoke-free zones, which if you really need to go smoke, go ahead and head outside the park. You can get a stamp and come right back in about 5 minutes later. But unfortunately, people have decided to make that their excuse to sneak in a vape and not so covertly smoke it in the middle of a packed line inside of a closed building. This is something I see all too frequently, no matter what state I'm in. And if anything, it's even more unfortunate in those parks that still have designated smoking areas. But I will say personally, I'm glad to not have to walk by those anymore. Number 6 is a big one for me. This is park guests not having any idea of what personal space is within queue lines. This is something that just really grinds my gears. When you don't move for an extra 10 seconds, let's say, and then the people behind you go, "Move up, the line's moving." That 10 seconds and me moving within that 10 seconds is not going to change how long you have to wait. This is some weird psychological phenomena that thinks that if you're moving, the wait is getting shorter. No, the wait will stay exactly the same if I don't move within that 10 seconds or not. Obviously, people should move throughout the line, but if it's literally like honking when the light turns green the moment it does, it is just so annoying. Or even worse, if they don't say anything and just end up being right behind you, breathing on your neck, kind of trying to get you to have that hint that they want to go forward. Like, seriously, I don't know you. Please back out of my personal space. This could go for so many different instances throughout my park visiting journeys, and it includes things like the classic kid falling on the other side of that rope that they were sitting on, or just plainly running throughout the queue, or of course the intimate couples that decide to make the queue their bedroom. Like, please, chill out. There are hundreds of us around you. Why are you wasting your money being here instead of just going back home? All right, at number 5, you can kind of tell I'm getting really annoyed just talking about these subjects at this point, but number 5 is something that really annoys me at parks, and that is when the park apps are completely inaccurate. Now, if I'm downloading a park app, I want to know more information. Unfortunately, a lot of parks after COVID have resorted to those just for maps nowadays, which that's fine. I'll use the map on the app. That's all right. But what really annoys me is when it comes to wait times or closures with the rides on the apps themselves. Now, if it just told me what rides were open and closed accurately, that's fine. You know, don't tell me wait times, I can walk over to the other side of the park. It is a little annoying to do that, but at least I'm not being fed completely false information all around. But then there's times where you visit a park and it'll say, oh, this ride is only a 5-minute wait, and you get over there and it's an hour and a half. Looking at you, Steel Vengeance. And then sometimes even worse is when it says a ride has just opened, but it's still closed and said to be closed the rest of the day, and the employees even say, don't trust the app. It doesn't work. But the park has made it so that the only way you can get information is through the app, but the information is always wrong. This goes for restaurants as well. Sometimes it will be a completely different closing time than what actually happens. Or heck, I've even seen shows be at the wrong time. Something that usually is at a very specific time and only for 3 or 4 times a day, being an hour off is kind of wild. This leads into my number 4 of this top 10, and that is having to use your phone for anything at parks. It kind of ties into the last one we were just talking about, but it really annoys me that I need to use it for a park app as my only way to see a map, my only way to see wait times, my only way to see what restaurants are open and what the menus are. And sometimes we can't even see what the menus are on the apps too. Like, don't even get me started on that. But the things that really frustrate me beyond belief at a lot of these parks is things like mobile order, having your ticket on your phone, and especially having to use your phone for Fast Pass or Fast Lane and reservations. I think you can tell what park I'm really trying to get at right now. When I visit a park, I want to use my phone as sparingly as possible. I want to be able to walk around, have a great time, disconnect a little bit from the outside world. Granted, I will say a lot of the time I am filming around the parks, but that's as much as I want to use my phone, is taking pictures, taking video, or texting a friend or family member that is in a different spot in the park. Outside of that, I want nothing to do with my phone. I want to be on rides. I want to be having a fun time with friends and family. I want to be taking in the sights and sounds that surround me. But there are certain parks nowadays, Disney, that make it so you have to constantly be looking at your phone at all times in order to potentially get the opportunity to ride a ride. Or it's the only way that you can buy certain food items. And of course, having to mark the specific day that you have to go, even if you're a pass holder. Like, it's all these small annoyances that add up into this one thing that just annoys the heck out of me. Now, talking more about phones a little bit, at number 3, this is another pet peeve of mine, especially since I am filming around parks. This is people obnoxiously live streaming or filming or being loud or filming on rides they're not supposed to, all over the parks. Don't get me wrong, I walk around the parks and film all of the updates I can, or give you a glimpse into shows, and even film on certain rides at certain parks that are okay with it. But then, just like that 0.1% of employees that ruins the record for others, there are these extremely annoying and obnoxious vloggers out there that will turn their flash on a dark ride. Make sure they're yelling over everyone else, or sometimes shouting out donations while they're walking past a family enjoying the park for the first time. This has gotten to the point where parks are implementing policies overseas, like in Tokyo Disney, that specifically forbids that from happening. And it's just so annoying, especially, I'm sure, for people visiting these places for the first time, to be riding Pirates of the Caribbean, let's say, and somebody behind them is just yelling about their donations the entire time while their flash is on, making it so you can't even enjoy the ride itself. And don't get me started on Pirates of the Caribbean, there's so many things on that ride that people do wrong. But yeah, it's a weird thing to see, especially now, so many people walking around with these giant gimbal setups, talking to their Facebook Live or their TikTok Live or whatever it is, shouting out donations or having their flash on, or especially filming on roller coasters that do not allow filming whatsoever. Like, please stop taking your phone or GoPro out on Ghost Rider. Goodness gracious, they're gonna stop you on the lift hill and then kick you out of the park. That is something I see absolutely everywhere, and do remember, in the state of Ohio, this is something I saw multiple times too, but in the state of Ohio, it is illegal. And I will recognize that's one of the few positives with Ohio. I'm kidding. But genuinely, at that point, it's becoming a safety issue, and you could genuinely injure someone behind you, and it's unfortunately something we saw recently on Twisted Colossus, I believe. And it's something I've actually had to dodge myself multiple times. I've almost been hit by a phone, I think 3 or 4 times now. So that 0.1% of these vloggers out there, or wannabe famous TikTokers, there are so many better ways to do it than that. And usually they're ways that follow park policy. Now, we were just talking about how loose articles aren't secured. Well, my number 2 has to do with that. I'm okay with paid lockers. I think that's an alright solution to the issue with people having loose articles on them. It is a more secure way to keep them off of the ride, at least, than free bins. I will say free bins are a lot easier on a guest perspective and a lot more cost effective. However, there is that risk with things being taken from them. And of course, operations are a little bit slower when they have to hop the train and then get back in the train afterward. And while paid lockers can be annoying, if they are within a reasonable price, I'm okay with spending an extra couple bucks to bring in a bag and make sure my park visit is a little bit more accessible to me if I need to bring a jacket for later in the day, bring in a water bottle so I don't have to spend a crazy amount on water, or even bringing in sunscreen or a hat for sun protection. So with parks that charge $1 per usage, I'm okay with that. And I'm especially okay with parks that have an all-day system where you can spend $5, maybe up to $10 to use any locker within the park all day long, and as many as you need. It is a little annoying moving the stuff from locker to locker. The systems are a little weird still, but what I cannot stand with every fiber of my being is spending upwards of $5 per locker rental and not being able to have an all-day option. Are you kidding me? If I'm having to spend upwards of $25 just to ride 5 of your rides that I've already spent a crazy amount of money on, and I have to individually go to each of these lockers, put in my card every single individual time, sometimes it doesn't even work too because the machines are so finicky, I'm not wanting to go back to your park. Plain and simple. Especially if you have multiple water attractions that almost beg for you not to bring your loose articles on, just to make sure they don't get destroyed. And man, if it's a busy day, imagine it's a 2-hour wait for something, you put something into your locker, and then the time runs out and you have to pay even more with your card that is inside the locker, so you can't physically get it out without having to go up to a freaking employee to get it out in the first place. Then you have to pay afterwards, and then the receipt gets lost anyway because you accidentally left it in your pocket. Anyway, yeah, paid lockers are really, really frustrating, and I can't stand them when they are single use only. I understand they're usually an outside vendor, but to raise your prices on it and not offer an all-day pass for it is just nickel and diming your customers, and it's really, really, really annoying. Yeah, so number one is line jumpers. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. Like, don't jump in line if you got to use the restroom. Like, go pee beforehand. Like, you ever think about that? Like, oh, I see the line is 45 minutes. I'm gonna make sure I don't go to the restroom before. Or if it's an emergency, you can have your group wait for you, and let everybody else go in front of you. Maybe that's an option. You ever think about that? Yeah, line jumpers. I don't like them. You're a line jumper. You're not my friend. Plain and simple. Don't do it. It's rude. Everybody's got to wait the same amount of time unless you pay a lot of money. In which case, you know what? Fair enough. You got the money to spend. Yeah. So happy Listmas, everybody. That was day 3. Thanks, everybody, so much for watching. I appreciate it. And tomorrow, we won't be talking about something so annoying, so I promise I'll be a little friendlier to non-line jumpers, just like yourself. Appreciate you all. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't. I'd really appreciate that. But until tomorrow, we'll see you on the next ride.